Good day, everyone. Today I'm going to present to you about uh, the the effect or the surprise given by this pandemic. So I prepare my report with the title COVID-19 Pandemic Surprise. If we look at the real scenario nowadays that we are experiencing, there are questions that we are going to look at, and we really now asking this question even in ourselves. What, where, who, when, why, and how? All of us will be affected in this surprise given by COVID-19. And the speed of spreading the virus turned into worse and considered as pandemic crisis. Today, nobody is exempted. All were threatened and trembled in all the world. All nations were not prepared that affect the entire economy and even in the education sector or industry. Every year, education systems in many countries are disrupted because of climate change related to natural hazards and armed conflicts. But the world has not seen this level of disruption of education spread with uniformity since Second World War. Education industry, according to UNESCO, has been temporarily closed of at least 90% of the world for the legitimate public health aim of containing the spread of virus. Now, how this coronavirus, or how is the COVID-19 pandemic affecting you? Not only you, but the entire economy of all nations. And one of those industries were really affected nowadays because of this surprise of COVID pandemic crisis is the education industry. According to UNESCO, that 119 countries have closed school nationwide since the COVID-19 outbreak, disrupting the learning and education of an estimated 895 million students, wherein millions more countries order school closures, but the government are still obligated to respect the right of education. So, regardless of what is happening nowadays, still we need to look at how we are going to continue the education of our learners. That our government are still obligated to respect the right to education. So what is now? Since there are school and classroom closures and a physical classroom no more in our current life, the government needs to mitigate so that the learnings of our learners should continue even we are experiencing this crisis. How the government can mitigate? By looking at the following items, which is very hard to connect: the disproportionate effects on children and youth who are already experienced barriers as accessing education, especially those who are at higher risk of being excluded for a variety of reasons, like the children with disabilities, students in remote location, students who depend on schools for daily hot meal, and families were lost income as a result of job cuts for precocious employment. Nowadays, the technology connects people in their home. So, its limitations for learnings are on display for the world to see. For some countries, using technology are the best approach or option for now. Like for Hong Kong, learning at home. China, 100 million Chinese got access to learning material through the live television broadcast, and some on new cloud-based or online learning by upgrading a suite of education infrastructure led by the Education Ministry of Industry and Information Technology, or using the 5G technology, including Japan and USA. This is the way they are going to cope with this crisis, using the 5G technology, wherein it provides the learners to embrace learning anywhere and anytime. For Nigeria, they are using reading materials via Google Classroom and face-to-face instruction. For Lebanon, online learning, even subjects such as physical education. But here in the Philippines, we have nothing to do for now, because this is really a surprise in our nation, in our country, and in all of us here, Filipinos. We're really not prepared on this crisis or pandemic of COVID-19. So the education sector, we need to look at the best approach so that we can continue our learnings, especially to our students or the learners. So the education sector needs to look at, is the technology fully embedded in the system? There is an internet availability within communities. There's an availability of hard copies of learning materials, or ensuring adequate working condition for teachers and education staff. So this is the things that our nation need to look at, because we have no choice for now, because there is no physical classroom open for our learners, and this really make it hardly to our teachers and our learners nowadays. It totally disrupted the education in the Philippines. Is really nothing to do for now but to stop while making something in coping this kind of surprise of COVID-19. So according to Dr. Deborah Price, a senior lecturer in inclusive education and well-being at the University of South Australia, Education Futures Academic Unit, and president of Australian Curriculum Studies Association, or ACSA, discusses some practical ways to overcome these obstacles and embrace the teaching and learning opportunities this new environment provides. So this is now a new normal for all of us. The rapid emergence of the unprecedented pandemic calls on the well-evidenced expertise, responsiveness, and creativity of early years teachers in scaffolding learning experiences that integrate the individual context that young children are inhabiting during school isolation and COVID-19 requirements. Price says that we need to draw on the expertise and will advance online distance learning strategies that teachers in rural and remote regions needs to. Number one, in order to help our students, let us check out for well-being status of our students and our teachers. So how we are going to look at it? How's the well-being status of our learners? There are 6 items that we need to look at our learners, especially in our teachers, that we need to check out. the moods, the resilience, the engagement, communication, relaxation, and positivity, which is this considered as the 6-star student survey measure vital areas of student well-being. So we need, as a teacher, we need to model a calm and a caring approach to children and their families' individual context, and needs to provide a stable influence and support emotional well-being. We need, as a teacher, to avoid trying to exactly replicate the face-to-face learning experience directly to an online learning platform, and apply inclusive practices to ensure all children have access to learning and are actively engaged in learning. And we need to educate young children and their families and carers on e-safety, that is remaining safe online. So this is now the best approach that we are going to do by having a continuous learning using the e-learning or internet learning. And we are really aware of this, that our nation is not ready, the Philippines is not ready for this surprise of COVID-19 pandemic. So the teachers and school leaders around the world, from early learning centers, preschool, kindergarten to senior secondary, have been coping with how best to support students and their parents or carers during COVID-19 restrictions. So what are the response of UNESCO on this situation? So it is really important for us to look at how the UNESCO responded on this kind of situation. So here are the response of UNESCO regarding the surprise of COVID-19 pandemic. UNESCO plans to hold the UNESCO World Conference on Education for Sustainable Development after COVID crisis, and their objectives are based on the 40th UNESCO General Conference last November 2019 that adopted the Global Framework on Education for Sustainable Development, or they call it ESD, for the period 2020 to 2030. This Education for Sustainable Development for 2030 aims to build a more just and sustainable world through strengthening education of sustainable development, and contributing the framework will focus on integrating the ESD, or education for sustainable development, and the 17 sustainable development goals, policies, learning environments, capacity building of educators, empowerment and mobilization of youth, and local level action, by introducing subjects such as: number 1, gender studies and environment sustainability, as we are experiencing right now. Education system across the world to ingrain among their students these concepts at a very young age. Multidisciplinary, interdisciplining, and multidimensional approaches. The overall objective of the exercise hinges around the idea of translating academic concepts into relatable real-life challenges and finding their solutions. So, another items that they are wanted to introduce the subject for this education for sustainable development is to focus on the soft skills such as critical thinking, problem solving, leadership, and communication, equip students with the right toolkit to deal with their challenges. They also wanted to help students develop a deeper understanding of the real-life challenges that the global community is facing. And also, they wanted to have a holistic approach not only to develop virtues such as sympathy and compassion, but also correlated with better grades and a wider range of future academic and professional opportunities for students. And the last one is to churn out the next generation of community leaders who can think not only for themselves but also for those around them. So these are all the focus of the Education for Sustainable Development given by UNESCO. So, in this surprise COVID-19 pandemic, therefore, I conclude that based on the said evidences, hands-on experience on the surprising COVID-19, the said event helps to open the eyes of the world that managed by our governments and the education industry to be vigilant and aware about the speed changes and transformation in this era. It will also give lesson that after we all survive this COVID-19 pandemic, the government, especially in our nation, Philippines, that they need to invest enough budget to cope all the resources needed in the future. They need to give more trainings and seminars to enhance the skills, abilities, and capacities of our respective teacher to sustain the education development that our learners need to earn. And the free access of internet must be needed to any areas including the remote location to sustain the learnings of the learner in these sudden circumstances that require them to stay at home. So this is how I look at the crisis of COVID-19 affected the socio-cultural of our world. And these changes need to be attended accordingly, so that we are all ready if these things happen again in the future. So this is my report, and thank you so much. Here are the references of my report. Thank you.